So I'm going to introduce Luki, guys. As you guys have probably checked out on the Eventbrite and the announcements that we usually post on Discord, this is not Luki's first time into Mintbean. He's an extremely useful career mentoring coach. I feel like that word gets thrown around way too many times these days. There's a lot of different career coaches out there, a lot of advice, and it's like, how do we kind of make sense of it all? This is not just like, he hasn't been doing this for 5 years. This is a lifelong journey that he's been on. It was at Centennial, if I'm not mistaken, that you were. Sorry, I'm not recalling the college that you were working with for.
Yeah, I teach at Centennial, but I do work with pretty much every college or university around the GTA. So
Yeah, that's kind of where you first started kind of working with young people in terms of getting them into, the careers that they were looking for, and just dealing with what comes with that, whether it's anxiety, whether it's stress, whether it's imposter syndrome. He's written an amazing book on imposter syndrome, and I'd encourage you guys to all give that a read. And I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. So I'll give the mic back over to you, Luki.
perfect. Thanks so much, Navi, for hosting me, and for the Mintbean community for having me and taking time out of your Wednesday in order to listen to me. So for those that don't know me, Luki Danukarjanto. I'm Indonesian. Folks are usually curious about the last name. But I'm ancestrally Chinese, as you can probably see if you're looking at the video. Yeah, I was born there, but I grew up in the Toronto area, and I ended up doing a degree in computer science. So I'm a fellow coder or a technical person there. But I ended up falling into, well, when I graduated, it was the dot-com bubble crash, right? Everything just burst there. So I'm older for those that don't know when that happened. So it was really hard for folks to get a job. And the funny thing I usually say is 9/11 just happened, and SARS was about to happen, right? So it's kind of like COVID is kind of all those three elements, like a crash and a virus and a state of emergency in the world that happened together. So these things happen on a regular basis, right? And not necessarily this severe. It is unprecedented times, until the next one happens, which was still going to be unprecedented. Until the next one that happens, it's going to be unprecedented. So just being aware that every kind of 6 to 12 years, something like this that happened. For those who were in finance in circa 2008, 2009, you'll know that very well. And I was the dot-com bubble, kind of circa 2002. There's one in the 90s and the 80s and 70s. And every time that you go through it, there's going to be something there. So as stressful as it is now, let's kind of regroup, recover, and set ourselves up for the next one. Hopefully it's not COVID 2028 or whenever it is going to be instead of 19. Hopefully we'll have some more time, but just keep that in mind. So I ended up graduating during that time and ended up working with Deloitte. So Deloitte is one of the accounting firms, but I was on the consulting side. So I was a coder there, and I basically moved into the business world, and I spent over 12 years there. And by the end of it, I was running a small practice area. So I had about 25 people reporting to me. I was on my way to become partner, was kind of the next step, which is basically kind of C-level executive. And then I had what I call my quarter career crisis, which is basically like, is this what I wanted to do? to go up to that next level partner. I was starting a family at that time, so I had a kid. And as a consultant, I traveled a little too much. So I was on a plane Monday morning, back Thursday, plane Monday, back Thursday. So it was a pretty rough way of raising a kid. And I wanted to think of different ways to do it. So after a lot of soul searching, self-reflecting, and talking to mentors, I found that coaching was something that I loved doing, and it was something that I was good at as well. So I started that full-time about 5 years ago. And as Navi mentioned, I've always been mentoring and coaching people in all sorts of different ways. But really just got threw myself into it to 100% about 5 years ago. And yeah, now I wrote a book. It's called Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier. And a lot of what I share in my workshops is exactly that. It's like, why aren't they teaching this stuff in school? So in today's topic, I'll go into kind of stress and anxiety and a little bit of dealing with that, because that's kind of being human, right? We're filled with all that. And like I said, as stressful as times are right now, things will improve. It always does. This too shall pass. But at the same time, it's going to happen again, because just like there are seasons, we're entering winter right now. We're well into the winter of COVID, and eventually spring will come, right? Like metaphorically and actually. But at some point, winter will kind of rear its head again within the seasons. Hopefully, we'll have a bunch of years of prosperity, but it'll happen. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And I'd love if folks, again, if you're able to go on video and interact, if not in the chat, what are some of the stressors of today, right? So for a bunch of you, you're trying to stay safe in COVID, right? That's definitely a concern for most folks. Sometimes for those that are working, it's kind of work-life balance. For those of you who are looking for jobs, that you can probably see finances, the bank account is dwindling week by week, that sort of thing. For others, it's physical health, mental health. Again, for those job searching, the constant rejections is not a great thing. Could be relationships, or it could be something else. And I'd love if you kind of type in the chat, what are kind of your biggest stressors, right? So you can pick any of that that's there, or something else. And I can try to tailor a little bit of the conversation or the parts in order to focus more on the areas. Okay, so we have a bunch of work-life balance ones here. And then hopefully as the physical health is another one. So what we'll cover in today's session is a little bit of stress and the origins, right? So you have to understand that actually stress is a good thing, right? Whether you like to admit it or not, stress can be a good thing. And oftentimes it depends on your perspective towards it. I'll give you some tools in order to help you manage the stress. And we'll talk about, well, how do you take advantage of those tools and implement them in your life? So for those that are curious, stress really, it started in the savannah, or depending on which anthropologist you talk to in terms of human evolution. But if you can imagine, right, and if you want to, you can close your eyes and imagine that you're like one of your ancestors back on the plains of Africa, right? And you're there with your tribe, right? Some of them cooking by the fire over there, a couple of the village kids playing on the side, and you're just going about your day, getting ready to get started. But then suddenly, the hairs on the back of your head stand up, and you feel a surge of adrenaline. Your heart starts beating faster, and you know that something's wrong. There's a rustle in the tall grass off to the side, and that spurs you to grab your spear that's aside. And you recognize this feeling. You recognize this feeling before, because that last time it happened, it was when one of the village children was attacked by a wild animal. So you're on high alert, and you see just off of the tall grass, there's a hyena, a pack of hyenas that are waiting there, about to snatch one of the children. So you rush towards them, and you yell and scream, and you try to get all the other tribesmen to get in there and help protect the children. You get them to run over, and you know that hyenas are cowardly by nature, so they hightail it out of here. But they were probably a foot close to being eaten and disappearing out of the tribe. You give one of the little kids a hug, tell them to go off to their parents, and then you put your spear down and you continue on your day, right? So that was a reality for a lot of our ancestors there, right? And that it was useful because it kept our ancestors alive. We're here because we had stress. But in today's day, there are very few things that can actually kill us. We don't really have bears or lions or tigers or whatever else that can eat us. But instead, we have the stresses of the notification from your phone, your alarm, the deadlines, and this and that. And whereas our ancestors, once the hyena was gone, our stress response went down and we were able to focus on the rest of our days. Now we're in constant bombardment of these little stressors that are causing us to succumb to various challenges, and that it's that chronic stress that really hampers us, or really is a challenge for us. So if I geek out a little bit and talk about our brain, right? So we have basically three major parts of our brain. We have the base, the reptilian part, where most folks are familiar with that kind of fight or flight response, right? So that's the thing that kept our ancestors safe. And we have this emotional layer where that's the mammalian brain. And that's the thing that helped make your hair stand on head and you recognize that situation. It's basically an enhanced pattern matching machine that allows you to react more proactively than just in the moment, which that reptilian brain. And then we have the human, the thinking brain, right? And humans are generally rational and logical people, except when the emotional parts get activated, except when their fight and flight response is there, right? Which was good because it kept our ancestors alive. But the problem is, in order to get to that rational part, you have to go through those other two layers. So if those other two are over heightened or overstressed or over exaggerated, then it becomes challenging to think logically and think positively, think all those other things. So we really need to deal with those two. And right now, it's not really like the lions that we have to worry about, it's ants, right? And I borrow this term from Dr. Daniel Amen, who talks about automatic negative thoughts, right? So now we have these thoughts that come on, oh, I got rejected from another job, so therefore I'm not good enough, right? I am not able to find a person, which means I'm not a good enough mate. Oftentimes it's those feelings of not being good enough in whatever that causes us to have our stresses and anxieties there. And oftentimes those ants thrive when our environment, our mental environment is filled with language, filled with memories, filled with beliefs and attitudes that are negative. Right? It's those things that help keep us alive. But nowadays, apart from you like jumping in the middle of the street and getting hit by a bus, there's very few things that can actually kill you. Like you not getting that job interview is not going to kill you. You not doing good in the webinar presentation is not going to kill you, right? So very few that exist, but those stresses still linger. They still stay there. And it's those things that cause that the additional stress. So a quick hack that I recommend folks to do is, and we can all do it together, is what's called a body scan, right? And what happens is when you're worried about stress and anxiety, you're thinking about the future, right? Oh, what about that interview that's coming up? What about that deliverable? What about what's for dinner coming up later on? You're worrying about that. When you're scared, you're thinking about, the past, right? Because you didn't get that interview, you didn't get that offer, you didn't get that promotion, you didn't get that whatever. You're dealing with that fear of things that happened in the past. But what about the present, right? So for those of you who are students of like meditation and mindfulness, then oftentimes it's that present, you realize that's the only thing we have right now. The future hasn't happened yet. And the past, you can't do anything about it. The future is really all we have, right? So if I encourage you to take a moment right now and basically sit with me and do a body scan, right? And you can do this anytime you want. It usually takes about a minute. It may be a little more if you are slower, but I encourage everyone to close their eyes, right? And imagine that you're in a science fiction movie and there's a bit of a laser, right? That's going from the top of your body and down. And you want to imagine and feel the hairs on the top of your head. And you want to feel your forehead, feel your eyebrows, your nose, feel your lips, your chin, down past your neck, past your shoulders, down your back, the small of your back, past your hips, past your thighs, all the way down past your knees, past your calves, past your ankles, your feet, all the way to your toes, and maybe wiggle them if you want. Back up your feet, your ankles, calves, knees, back up your thighs, past your hips, small of your back, up your back, shoulders, neck, your chin, mouth, nose, eyebrows, forehead, hairs on your head, and you might feel them tingling right now. And for those of you who actually went through that, a lot of you will probably feel like, just that 30 seconds, that 1 minute felt so much better, right? And this is a very simple exercise that a lot of folks you can do pretty much anywhere. before you have an interview, before a big presentation, before a difficult conversation with someone, before anything. You can do a quick body scan, again, 30 seconds, a minute up and down, that sort of thing, and you get into the present, right? And you focus on that. So doing that, incorporating in that day can do wonders in that. So unfortunately, I have to get back to the topic of stress. So really, what is that? So it's really just pressure that's there. And you might feel it in the physical sense, in terms of pressure on your body, or in the emotional and mental sense, right? So people are familiar with kind of physical stress, but there's also psychological stress, so kind of that mental stress. There's also psychosocial stress, the stress with relationships, and then psychospiritual, which is kind of like purpose and is there more out there as well. There are different types where people talk about acute stress, like something that happened in the moment, but then it's gone. Episodic acute, which basically means that in certain circumstances, someone triggers you or this thing triggers you, and it happens on a repeated basis. And then the one that's the worst and probably the most challenging for all of us is chronic stress. It's kind of that low level kind of buzz of a stress that happens because we're worried about something like the finances or work-life balance or this and that or whatever that happens. It could be based on time. You have like a due date, something that you expect to happen or not to expect to happen in a particular situation, or based on your encounters with people. And there's something that people actually don't acknowledge enough. It's called Eustress, right? Which is basically the good stress, right? Because sometimes people perform better when they are stressed. And you might have been in that situation where like, yeah, I know I got to get this done and I'm going to do an amazing job. And that stress actually makes you grow. That's the stress that we want. And oftentimes, really that's with you everywhere. And it's often just a matter of perspective, right? And this is a difficult pill for a lot of folks to swallow, that oftentimes it's your choice on how you decide to view things, right? There's a quote that I like, and apparently Henry Ford says it, but I found it from Confucius kind of thousands of years before, but he who thinks he can and he who thinks he can't is probably correct, right? So think about that for a moment, where oftentimes it's where you place your focus that really dictates when things happen, because things happen and it's up to you to decide on whether it's good or bad. There's a proverb out there of a farmer that basically finds a beautiful white stallion, right? And he brings it back to his village, and the other villagers say, that's good, right? But the farmer, in his wisdom, says, neither good nor bad, nobody knows, right? Because the next day, the stallion runs away. And then the villagers say, well, that's bad. He's like, well, neither good nor bad, nobody knows. Because the next day, the stallion comes back with an even more beautiful stallion. Well, that's good. Well, neither good nor bad, nobody knows, because the farmer's son rode on the stallion and then broke his arm. Well, that's bad. Well, neither good nor bad, nobody knows, because the next day the emperor's army comes in and conscripts all the young men, but because he broke his arm, he didn't have to go fight in the war. Well, that's good. Well, neither good nor bad, nobody knows. And the story keeps on going on and kind of says, well, with whatever circumstance that happens, it's really your choice on whether to make it good or bad, right? And for those that are anxious and stressed and nervous about something, then oftentimes what it also means is that you are excited about something else, right? So you're nervous and anxious about doing well in this interview, right? Which means you're excited about the opportunity to be able to showcase how amazing you are and be able to be a fit for this role, right? So oftentimes the energy and the reaction where you get like butterflies in your stomach and you have a little bit of tension and your hands are a little bit sweaty and calm and clammy. Well, whether you're anxious or excited, the physiological response is pretty much the same. It's just a different story. It's a different energy that's attached to it. So when you think of being anxious and saying, hey, can I be excited about something else? Then that totally shifts different gear. And now you think you can and do that. And Gandhi has a word that basically amounts to your beliefs become your destiny, right? So all the thoughts that you have, everything that comes in there, your choices that you make ultimately become what's there. And humans, we're pre-programmed to have those ants, have those beliefs, have those things. And we operate kind of like a computer, right? We don't have keyboards or mice or touch screens, but we do have our senses, right? We have our eyes, we have our ears, we have our touch, a little bit on smell and taste as well. But when you experience something, it goes into yourself. And whatever you experience, even people in the exact same instance can experience things totally differently, right? Because based on their perspective, based on their experiences, it was different. So even the words you use can have a different aspect. So the scenario that I usually use is can everybody think of a picnic, right? And if I say the word picnic, you probably have an image in your head, right? Do some of you have kind of like the blanket with like the red and white squares and checkers on that? Do some of you have like a picnic basket on there? There's all of you outside, right? Do any of you have KFC? Right? Well, I do, because when I was growing up, every picnic that we went on, for whatever reason, my dad thought it was a great idea to buy a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. So for me, picnic means Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? But for a lot of you, you're like, what are you talking about? Why would I have KFC in my picnic, right? We have sandwiches, or we have whatever. Well, that's because that was your experience. And if you had supportive parents, or one's more critical parents, or you had friends, family, brothers, sisters, whatever it is, all of that also colors your perspective as well. And we turn that and make meaning into whatever, because we're bombarded by a whole bunch of stimuli, but we're really only able to focus on about 128 bits. So the statistic is like 11 million bits come to us, and we're only able to focus on 128, because for most of you, until I mentioned the feeling of the chair on your butt, you probably didn't even notice that, right? Or the toes inside your socks right now, you probably didn't notice that too, assuming you're wearing socks, right? And there's probably a whole bunch of other things that I can go through that you're not even aware of, like your breath. Nobody was really paying attention to their breath until I actually just mentioned it. So what you focus on really transcribes. So a lot of the things that happen to you, those anxieties and stresses, it's just that we haven't learned to learn from them, right? Oftentimes those stress, those anxieties, those emotions that we have, it's information. We just haven't yet dealt with it. We haven't learned from it, and therefore they stick with us, because they want us to learn, they want us to grow, and it's up to us to do that. And one thing that I actually take inspiration from, my kids have a book. It's called Captain Snout and the Superpower Questions, right? So it's a superhero. He's an anteater. Get it? Like ants, right? So he's an anteater. So he comes in and saves the kids, the day for the kids. And he basically has these superpower questions that basically all those negative thoughts that come into your head, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to be able to get a job. I'm not going to be able to find a husband or get a promotion or a partner or whatever it is, right? The simple question is it true, right? And do you 100% know it's true, right? And that actually comes from the work of someone called Byron Katie, where she furthers on and says, like, well, how do you react when that happens, when you believe that thought, right? And then she further subdivides and says, well, can you see a reason to drop the thought? And can you find a stress-free, peaceful reason to keep the thought? Who would you be without that thought? And then what you want to do is turn it around. So when you say, you're not good enough, like, well, the job's not good enough for me, right? Like, I want a job that's better fit for me, right? So this comes from a body called the work, right? And if you actually can take these questions and do the work on yourself, then it really just talks about perspective, right? And answering that. So I encourage you to take a look at either Captain Snout or the work by Byron Katie, and do the work on yourself, right? Because a lot of times it's you taking all the things that happen to you and adapting your perspective that will go along the way. And we can't go through and do the work with everybody here, but I'll give you a couple of other tools and techniques to help. And yes, I'm happy to share the presentation, so I'll make it available to folks if they reach out to me, for those that are interested. So one thing that as you're dealing with stresses and anxieties and whatever, is to think about whether it's something that is in your sphere of influence or your sphere of concern, right? So for those that are familiar with the Serenity Prayer, I love this one, where it says basically, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? Because a lot of people have things that they're concerned with. There's all these things where like what's happening down south with the election, and like all the COVID situations and all that sort of stuff. All of that stuff is in our influence of sphere of concern, right? But what of it is actually in our sphere of influence, right? Can we change like who gets voted in to our election? Well, someone out here for sure. Hopefully, you voted and influenced that decision. For those Americans that are online, you hopefully had. But us being, or me being in Canada, I couldn't have done anything about it. It doesn't make sense. Now, what I could have done is gone down south, crossed the border, and rallied with all my American friends and kind of put a stance one way or the other. But otherwise, like, it really has no influence on me, right? All that sort of stuff, I can't change it, right? Unless I choose to. So going back to that perspective, if you can do something about it, well, then you choose whether you want to do something about it now or later. And if you can't do something about it, then why worry about it? You can't do anything about it, so why bother, right? Why let that stress you out? So oftentimes taking those perspectives can help you out immensely. Like, okay, you apply for a job, right? Can you influence the decision on whether they give you an interview? Probably not, right? Not at the point there. Well, now what you could do is you could network and connect with people. Well, now that's in your influence because you're doing things in step. You can attend networking events put on by that company. You can connect with someone and do a value project for someone. Now you're in your sphere of influence, but otherwise worrying about it doesn't really help you, right? So in your concern, it's there and available, but if you can't do anything about it, why does it matter? So something to think about it. And going back to the perspective of choice, really there's a thing, there's a stimulus, there's something that happens. And it's neither good nor bad, nobody knows, right? But what happens is sometimes we automatically react to it, right? For anybody who knows Daniel Kahneman and his thinking fast or slow, we have kind of like two systems, right? The system one is kind of that automatic system that is our reactive one, and system two is the more thoughtful one where we can actually think about it, right? And it's that space, it's that little time like just before we react to it that really is where our freedoms lie. So for those that know Viktor Frankl, he wrote a book called The Man's Search for Meaning, and he was a Holocaust survivor and witnessed a whole bunch of atrocities. And he found that the people who had meaning in their life were the ones that survived, right? And really it's them giving meaning because they were all in the same circumstance. They were all in a concentration camp. They were all being subjected to a whole bunch of horrendous acts. But it's the ones who thought about it differently that's ended up surviving longer, right? So what I encourage you to do is instead of reacting, is to pause a minute, allow that space to increase and think about it. And if you're willing to stay with me and say that everything that's ever happened to you is based on a thought, right? And if you want to reverse engineer that, whatever's happening to you, it was because of an action, right? So if you kind of follow on the reverse side of that, where the result had an action, which was because of a feeling that you had, which became a thought, and it was resulted in a stimulus, right? So I use the acronym like Saint FAR, like STFAR, in order to do that. So the stimulus, something happens, right? In that story, a white stallion comes in, the sun breaks some legs or whatever. You have a thought about it, right? And it's really that thought that determines whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, whether you should be anxious about it or excited about it, whether it's an opportunity or a limitation. And as long as you can intercept that thought and actually be thoughtful about it, then essentially it has a feeling that's associated with it. So once you have that thought, you have a feeling. So either it's a positive feeling that serves you and helps you, or it's not a positive feeling and it does whatever it does to you, right? And that feeling will cause you to do something, which will cause a result, right? So if you think back to any situation you are, you can leverage this model and basically say, oh, everything that I do is based on a thought. Everything I do is essentially based on that choice in terms of where I take that thought. And understanding that perspective can help you immensely. And in terms of the thoughts that we have, we can basically do four things, right? We can either react to the thought, and that's usually when you lash out, you're angry and you're punching walls and you're hitting people and that sort of stuff. Sometimes you can resist, which is kind of like reacting, but at a slow burn pace where you're kind of pushing things down and you're like seething inside and you're clenching your teeth and you're like, I really, that person, how dare he say that thing about me, or how dare they reject me for the job interview, whatever it is. Other people, you ignore it, right? So that's another reaction where like you don't face it, and you choose just not to deal with it. I just want to distract myself by doing something else, right? Instead of applying to another job or dealing with this difficult coworker or whatever, I'm just going to do something else, right? And the thing that ideally we would do is to accept it, right? To understand that all of our emotions, all of our thoughts, they are here to signify something to us, to signify that something is important. And when we can accept that, it's not that we don't want to feel sad or don't want to feel angry or don't want to. We want to say, oh, why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling upset? Why am I feeling whatever it is I'm feeling? And then being able to address that and accept it, then you'll find a weight that's lifted off your shoulders, right? So I use that as a backdrop because it's super helpful when you start thinking about things and kind of all the anxieties. Sometimes in the moment, it's very difficult to do that. But oftentimes if you can take some reflection time at the end of the day and say, okay, that stressful moment that I had in the day, okay, let me run it through this model. Let me see, okay, oh shoot, I reacted to it. Oh, I resisted, I ignored it or whatever. How do I accept it? How do I understand? And doesn't mean you have to agree with it. That doesn't mean you have to like it. It just means that, okay, you know what, I can move on with this. So a couple of other hacks that I want to provide to you is, we talked about that perspective, right? So whenever you're feeling anxious and nervous about something, what can you be excited about, right? Flip it and say, okay, if I'm nervous or anxious about this, if I'm stressed out about it, what am I excited about? Because you're only nervous or anxious or excited about things you care about, right? Because if you didn't want the job, it's like, yeah, whatever. I'll just do whatever I do, right? There's no stress, no anything, right? So it's the things that you care about and understand, you know what, I really want this to happen and I would like it to happen. And these are all the things that you can do to move it forward. What ideally you can do is again, I mentioned that reflection exercise. At the end of the day, go find a piece of paper, write a line down the middle, and on one side, write all those negative thoughts, all those challenging thoughts, all the stresses, all the anxieties that you had, right? And on the right side, what do you want to think, feel, or how do you want to act in the future? So going through that model, right? So this thought, what do I want to change it to? What do I want to do? And the more often that you do that, the more that you are pre-programming yourself, right? You're writing a new algorithm, say if this, then that, right? Right now, it's if this. That's all that happens. That's the only thing that can happen. Now you want to do like, if this happens, now what else could you do? So you're now writing that new condition in order to reprogram. And it doesn't mean that you'll be able to do it the next time, but what you'll find is like, oh, I did it again. Right? I did it again. I did it again. I found this in public speaking. So if for any of you who have ever done Toastmasters, they have this thing called the counter, right? That literally when you're in the organization, they find when you say the like, right, but any of those filler words, those pauses. And I said that a lot when I was going through the club. I did it a lot. It's like, oh, Luki, 37 times. That's better than the 48 that you did yesterday or last week, right? I did that a lot. And I would find myself that I would be, every time I would almost like be hitting myself because I noticed it. So once you start noticing it, then the change can happen. So first of all, you need to notice it. Say, okay, this is what's happened. This is how I want to behave differently. And then again, you might not be able to do it in the moment, but later on, you'll get better and better and better and better. So when you pre-program those responses, you'll find that you'll get less stress. You'll be less anxious. And if anything, just put in a body scan to de-stress yourself in that moment if you can do that. Another thing to deal with stress and anxiety is to deal future visualization, right? So let's say you have an interview coming up, or like a big presentation that you have to do for the company, or a deliverable that's done, or whatever that's due in a week or whatever. As you're doing it, you're all stressed because that thing is happening. It's the fate of your career or your livelihood or whatever it is hangs in the balance of that. So you're all stressed and nervous, right? And that's not a good place to be in order for you to perform at your best, right? At least for some people like that Eustress. And if you're in there, well, then you're probably okay, right? For those of us who do get stressed, what you can do is future visualize. Because let's say your interview is at 10 a.m. tomorrow and it's going to finish at 11. How are you going to feel at 11:15? You're probably going to feel amazing. It's over. I did my best, whatever I can. So what you want to do is imagine yourself 15 minutes after the event is over, and basically bring that feeling with you right now. Because all these feelings, all these thoughts, again, you can conjure them up at any given point in time. You just have to make the choice to do so, right? Again, you have to increase that space a little bit so that you can, instead of react to it, accept it and then figure out, okay, what do you want to do instead? So that's another way for you to kind of decrease stress as well. And a fourth way that I'll give you is to practice compassion, right? And this is kind of an interesting one, but if you think about the people who are kind of the least stressed, like sometimes people conjure up the picture of like a Buddhist monk that is sitting there, and the whole religion is based on compassion, right? And basically having kindness and gratitude for other people around you, right? And a simple hack that I've found for doing this in order to practice compassion for someone is next time that person is pissing you off, that they're aggravating you, they're stressing you out, they're making you anxious or you're nervous or whatever, imagine them with angel wings. Poof. So imagine me right now with big fluffy angel wings just standing there. And for some of you, you just instantly, you kind of smiled and you laughed, right? Because like, well, most people have a good relationship with like angels or whatever from your religious tradition that you can insert there. But having that, like you can almost can't help but be happy or smile at that person, even though they might be pissing you off to no end, right? Just by expressing that compassion, because you know what? They're doing the best they can, right? You don't know what happened to them in the morning that caused them to be in that aggravated state. So I'm going to picture them like they're my angel telling me that I have something to do, right? So those are a couple of things that I encourage you to start thinking about. And one thing that I want you to do is all to take action, right? So it's good. Knowledge is great, but and knowledge is power, but it's not really. Knowledge is only power when you turn it into action. And then that's when it becomes real power. So I would love for you to pick one suggestion, any one that I talked about, to implement. And what I'd love is for you to incorporate what's called non-negotiable time in your day, right? And half an hour block, 15-minute, 10-minute, 5-minute block, and schedule it with the most important person in your life, you, right? The CEO of your life, and it's non-negotiable. Sorry, I can't move this meeting because I have a very important meeting. Oftentimes early in the morning or late in the evening, whatever you can imagine, just before you go to bed or just after you brush your teeth and kind of get ready to start the world. And do any of the things like reflect and write that line and reprogram yourself. Thinking about, okay, can I change any of those anxious parts into the excited? Did I take a moment to do a body scan? Did I do future visualization? Did I picture that person who pissed me off in angel wings or anything like that? And actually spend time to find new resources, because there's a lot of material on there to deal with stresses and anxieties and a lot of other tips and tricks. And I've only kind of scratched the surface of all the stuff there. Do the work, right? Ask the Captain Snout superpower questions, whatever it is. Take the time for yourself. Because the anxiety is not something that you kind of turn a switch and it's automatically off. If you think about it, your life and your brain is crawling with ants, right? For decades you've been having, and it's infested with ants. And the only way to get rid of them is to start cleaning them off, like 1 by 1, 10 by 10, 100 by 100, and to slowly do it. And they'll inevitably come crawling back in. But so you have to be diligent about keeping that. And the more that you do it, the more your mind and your life will be nice and tidy with all of that. So we covered a lot of things, stress origins and definitions. I walk you through kind of the whole Savannah thing, that the parts of the brains and, different parts of different types of stress, and really understanding that stress is good for you. And it's really up to you to take that stress and say, okay, how is what's happening to me good for me, right? And if you can take that perspective, then you'll get a lot more peace in your life. So we walk through things like the St. Farr model, right? The stimulus, thought, feeling, action, and result. And if you can really decompose your stress and anxiety in that model, then you'll find there's going to be a lot more relief in there. Perspectives. Steve, you can message me and I'll give you access to the presentation, so you don't have to take a picture of it. But perspective.
I just wanted this one slide.
Perspectives is a huge one, right? So thinking about like neither good nor bad, nobody knows, right? So it's really up to you. It's really your choice on how to make it a good one, something that serves you, right? Because emotions are information. Being sad, being upset, being angry, being anything it's a signal. It's telling you something that's not right, something that's not balanced in your world that you have to deal with. So before you resist it, before you ignore it, before you react to it, think about what you need to do to accept it. And then when you have that learning, then stresses start melting away pretty quickly. And do any of those hacks. Oh, I missed the power pose, but doing a body scan, future visualization. And for those that are familiar with TED Talks, if you're familiar with the work of Amy Cuddy, so she has something called the power pose, where basically it's a lot of people know that the mind follows the body, but also the body follows, well, the body follows the mind, but also the mind follows the body, right? So when you smile, right, even if it's a forced smile, you will naturally feel happier, right? So if you stand there in a confident pose, and what her confident pose is basically standing there like Superman, like Wonder Woman, like feet shoulder width apart, and kind of hands on your hips, and like chest out, and basically in your head you can kind of play like da 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 da, like Superman has come on the scene to save the day. And when you stand there for like 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, you'll find that you are naturally feeling more confident. So having a posture throughout your day of confidence, right? So even sitting up, right? Because when you're slouched there and working like this with like a gamer's neck and all that sort of stuff, when I just turned red, then you kind of feel that way. And otherwise, if you have a posture that's taking up space and doing amazing things, and you feel confident and proud, that's how your mind will take as well. And I encourage all of you to add some of that non-negotiable time, 5 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, whatever you can manage, and reflect, do any of those things, and pick something to do. So that's kind of what I had. And I'd love for folks to either through the chat or maybe to unmute themselves and let me know what was the most memorable takeaway from what we just talked about. What is one thing that you'll make sure to use in the next, either later today or tomorrow or sometime later this week? What is one thing that you would definitely do?
Is it okay?
Oh,
sorry.
You can go ahead.
No, you first. You first.
All right,
okay.
Sure. I like the ants analogy of it's no longer lions that we're worried about, but ants.
Absolutely. And the challenging thing is it's all these little tiny things. It's not a big giant lion. It's all these little things that stress us over time. But if you've ever seen like 1,000, 1,000,000 or whatever ants, that can be pretty treacherous. So yeah, definitely something to consider. Thanks, Ian. Josh, I think you want to say something?
Wait, I would say when it comes to just reacting and like when you go through a situation and then it's like the thought process and then just going through the steps of like thinking back as like to how you reacted to it and then just accepting it at the end. I'd say that's something that I learned a lot about, and I'll try later on in the day.
No, as long as you got it, then it's all good. So thanks, Josh, for sharing.
Wait, no problem.
I really like the idea of taking time for yourself and making yourself the CEO of your life and saying, please don't disturb me for these 10 minutes. I'm having an important meeting. I just have a lot of troubles getting everything consolidated in my head because I have like thoughts running around all day. And it's important to have this time, like this downtime for yourself too.
100%. And I encourage folks to think of it like an investment in themselves, right? And for those that like finance and compound interest, right? Compound interest doesn't only work for money. It also works in the investments in yourself. So if you invest 10 minutes, an hour every day, imagine putting like $60 in the bank every day for the rest of your life. Like how much would that compound into, right? So these aren't dollars, but this is kind of investment in yourself, in like the cleanliness of the ants and kind of future growth in the future. So thanks, Yasmina.
Yeah, I think my takeaway was flipping the script on anxiousness, right? So why am I anxious about this? Flip it and say, why am I excited about this? Like,
great.
If it's a negative result, how can I be excited about the negative result? Or even if it's a positive result, how can I be excited about the positive result?
Yeah. And oftentimes for folks, if they're worried about the result, so the result is not under your control, right? The only thing under your control is the effort and the activities that you put into it, right? So as long as you felt that you did your best, then that's all you can do. And if you didn't, well, then how can you do better next time, right? Because at the end of the day, it's in the past. You can't change it unless you want to invest your time in developing a time machine. Then that's a different story. But you can't change it. You can only move on from it. So thanks for sharing, Will.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible, Luki. I feel, we're a community of software developers, and sometimes we don't take a lot of time to think about this stuff. But working from home, and it's like you're not walking away from your environment, and you're not like, when you go to work or you go to school or you go to a WeWork or a shared, like you step away and you step into a different world, and you don't have to deal with whatever it is, like making your bed or just kind of looking at the same walls, or dealing with your partner, or dealing with your kids, or just the situation at home. It's a lot to deal with, and it's nice having a system where you can create practices for yourself and give back to yourself. One of the things that I had to work on, I graduated in the financial bubble, so I was having a lot of difficulty back in 2010 finding a job, because I think me and you talked about this, is that I wanted to work for a hedge fund, and at that time no hedge funds were hiring. So I ended up going into corporate finance, and I was in corporate finance for about 6 years, and I was very unhappy, and it just didn't click for me, like why I was so unhappy, until I stepped away from it and I took a year off and filled my cup and understood, what exactly do I need to make myself happy. I think it's really easy for, when you're in a situation where you are looking for that next opportunity because of financial stress, or just finding, like I said, I started with finding work is probably one of the most difficult phases anyone goes through. But you do have to understand that it's okay to take some time off and forgive yourself, whether it means not coding today, whether it means not sending applications, and structuring your time where maybe today's my day off, and whether that's Sunday or Monday or whichever day of the week. I think allowing that kind of structure where it's okay, I'm not going to do anything today. Yeah, I'm unemployed and today's my day off, and I work really hard for the 6 days on building my portfolio and working on my skill and doing job applications. And I'm okay with saying that today I get to sleep in bed, or eat pancakes all day, or whatever that may look like to you. So I really enjoyed your talk, so thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And self-care is so important and so underrated, right? Because a lot of folks don't do that. And the whole analogy, if you've ever been on an airplane, where put your mask on before you help other people, it's so true, especially for those that are kind of like caregivers or breadwinners, or people that are supposed to be the ones working and making money and taking care of their family, right? You need to take care of yourself first before you can take care of your family. And oftentimes that goes underappreciated and under-recognized. And when you're full, like you mentioned, your cup, then more can come out of that. And yeah, I encourage folks, and I'm figuring this stuff out too, as kind of put together as I feel on as I see him on this thing. After this, I'll be like, whew, I'm so glad that's over. I just presented in front of a whole group of people, and it's being recorded, and it's going to be broadcast, whatever it is. I'm dealing with these stresses too, but it's a reminder that's like, oh, okay, that means I have some excitement to be able to impact these people that were on here, and hopefully one of them has a takeaway, and one of them is less stressed because they were able to interact, they were able to picture their partner, spouse, boss, or whatever with angel wings and stuff like that, and like their day was just that much better. So if I can do that, and then for you to even like pay it forward, pay it back, or whatever it is for other people, then that goes a long way. Because as you mentioned, this is a community, and when you do things, it ripples out, right? So yeah, you can have a huge impact on others. Because what happens is, like, when you have those negativity, you have those ants, you have all that sort of stresses, then guess what's going to be happening when someone else receives that, right? It's just propagating that. But if you're able to interrupt kind of the interaction with someone else too, and have that acceptance instead of the reaction, whatever, then it's also a communal thing. So it's not just for yourself, it's for kind of the collective well-being. So yeah, Thank you so much for hosting me, and I hope to continue to be part of the community. And yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, if I could be of help in any way, let me know. If you want to, like, message, probably find me on LinkedIn, and then I can send you a link to the slides and stuff like that, and folks can get access to that, right? So yeah, I have more resources of other things if there are specific circumstances that folks need help with as well. I've read a lot and consumed a lot of content. So if I didn't cover it, I might have other things to help you as well.
Perfect. Well, Luki, thank you so much again for your time. And I know a couple of you guys joined the call a little bit later. We'll be putting up this video on YouTube. Usually takes us about a week or so to get these videos up. I know that we have a bit of a backlog that's going on. So eventually we'll definitely get this video posted. I'm hoping that we can start actually broadcasting some of these talks live. It actually helps in editing and production for us, and just kind of putting that video live so you guys can watch it later, because some of the stuff is really useful. Luki, if we can have that presentation, and if I can drop maybe even just some of the acronyms. I love your acronyms. You're really good with acronyms. So if you can have a couple of slides that we can drop on Discord, that would be amazing. Again, really appreciate your time. And guys, if you want to connect with Luki, I'll drop his LinkedIn on the Discord channel as well. And, you know, if you have any questions, whether it's for me or Luki, feel free to reach out.
I think I need an invite to the Discord because I didn't actually see that. So at some point I'll do that.
I'll LinkedIn it to you. And
does anybody have any questions, I guess, before we go? Probably open the floor up to the folks here if they have any questions or thoughts or any specific instances. I nominate this as a safe space, right? Because this is a challenging topic for many folks to do. So nothing, well, maybe if you're recording this is the time to pause or whatever. Or I don't know if folks are open to having it, because sometimes it's the questions that they have that everybody else has but aren't willing to share. That
I have a question.
So sure, Edward, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for taking your time to speak.
My pleasure.
What led you to want to put this message out?
What led me to put this message out? It's part of that positivity, that self-reinforcement, because what's the alternative for me to be grumpy and a grouch and for me to be negative in the world versus if I'm positive and kind of share this? Again, the book I wrote is stuff I wish I knew earlier, right? A lot of the stuff I've implemented in my own life, and it's helped. Right? And some people, they don't read, they don't listen to podcasts, they don't do whatever. And I've spent a lot of time doing this. So if I can help someone in a 1 hour conversation that took me like weeks to read or like find out whatever, why not, right? And help through. And I'm a huge believer in karma, right? So I'm a firm believer that the more I give, the more I receive, right? So I'm really getting nothing out of this right now, but I hope for a huge windfall from the universe, from whatever later on, right? Whatever it may that is. So for me, I like to give, and it makes me feel good, right? If I can get someone to come back and say, hey, Luki, like, remember the presentation you gave like last week, last month, last year? Like that helps so much. Like that, like it's priceless in my book, right? So yeah, that's I guess the answer. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. It does.
Okay, we have another question in the chat from Navish. He asked, suppose if you're studying for 7 to 8 hours, how are you able to cope with the stress or de-stress yourself?
Yeah, so suggestion that I'd have for that is to chunk it up. Right? So instead of studying for 8 hours, study for 4 Pomodoros, right? And for those who know what a Pomodoro is basically taking a 2-hour chunk and basically studying for 25 minutes, taking a 5-minute break, 25 minutes, 5-minute break, 25 minutes, and then 30-minute break. And then doing that times 4, and then you get your 8 hours, right? And oftentimes it's not the 8 hours that's a problem. There's a quote, and hopefully I don't butcher it. It's like, it's not the load that, the weight of the load that you carry, it's how you carry it. That's the difference, right? So if you imagine yourself with whatever, an 80-pound backpack, you could probably carry it up a mountain. But if you had 80 pounds and you were holding it like this, chances are most of us could not do it in one hand, right? And a lot of us are carrying our loads in one hand. They're trying to do that. Like if you have anything around you that's 80 pounds, I don't even know what it is, but if you could do it with one hand, you're immensely powerful. But a lot of us can actually carry a huge weight on our backs, like using their biggest muscles and all that sort of stuff, right? So it's how do you distribute that load? So instead of the 8 hours in one giant chunk, adding those breaks can do a whole lot. And then like in the middle, in those 5 minutes, add a body scan in there, right? And do a future visualization. Imagine your study partner is the angel wings, like all these different things or whatever you want. Take 5 minutes to do the work or whatever it is. That can help. Walk around the block, right? For those folks that want to do that, do some jumping jacks. Like there's all sorts of things, a power pose that you don't want to take it as an 8-hour commitment. Break it down and then you can manage that. So hopefully that helps, Navesh.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add something on that. Sorry, Raul, I'm just going to jump in for a second. I find that sometimes with like I used to code about 3 years ago. I don't anymore because I kind of went deeper into business. When you're kind of very new to software development, in order to really get into that critical problem solving mode, like it usually takes like 30 minutes to just get into it. You know, you're just absorbing the problem. So I find that like one model doesn't fit for everyone. Like, you know, if a 25 minute and then 5 minute might work really well for maybe even myself or you, but might not work for someone else. So my advice on that is don't just kind of like try different systems. And, you know, one system might work for your best friend or your partner, and then another system might work for you. So don't get stuck on a system that works or is advocated by someone else. Figure out what that system is for you, whether that is, you know, 25-minute increments and then 5-minute breaks and then, you know, the model that Luki suggested, or whether that's going in for 4 hours and then taking a longer walk and then, you know, and then coming back for another 4 hours. So figure out what that rhythm is my personal take on it.
And that's a good point. And so as clarification to that, so actually my Pomodoros are 45-minute chunks, right? So I don't do 25 because you're right. I don't find that gives you enough time to get in the zone type of thing. I need like kind of a little bit longer. Maybe I'm slower than most or whatever. But I do in a 2-hour block, I'll do like 45, I'll do 5, 45, and like 15 or 20, whatever the remaining amount is. But I will break it up. And you'll find that even though you're kind of getting into the zone, even having a timer that stops you off, it's 5 minutes, right? You'll be able to get back in the zone really quickly, and that break can be huge. It's kind of like for those that know like NASCAR, like they have to go around the thing like 500 times. But if they did it 500 times in one go, like their tires are going to blow, everything's going to break. But if they're in the pit stop and they take that minute, then they can keep going and going and going and going. So people need that too. So yeah, but good clarification.
Good point.
Royal, you had a question?
Yeah, mine was just real simple. It was what's Luki's go-to de-stressor for you personally?
My go-to de-stressor, well, it depends on the type of stress. So yeah, it's actually just simple breathing, right? So it would be a body scan, maybe not a full body scan, but it's just more. I'm kind of a gratitude, like a loving kindness type of guy, right? So I'll actually sit there if I'm stressed. I'll probably stand up. I'll probably stretch, right? And I'll close my eyes and I'll try to think of something that I'm thankful for, right? And I try to feel it, right? So they're saying that I'm thankful for it, but I actually say like, if I'm thankful for my kids, like I'll imagine myself like hugging my kids or we're playing and like play fighting or whatever, like I actually physically try to get it into my body, that same kind of grateful emotion that I have, not just that, oh, I'm thankful for my house, I'm thankful for my computer, I'm thankful for that. It's actually bringing the emotion of gratitude within you. Because that's the great thing is all these emotions are available to you, like pretty much at any time, right? So you can have that. So that would be my kind of go-to distressor. It would be to just be thankful for something and take a deep breath, all right? And that there's something to be said about breathing, right? And just 3 deep breaths can go a long way.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions? Awesome. So I'll let everybody get back to their day. Thanks again to the Mintbean team for hosting. And yeah, as Navi said, I guess this information will be available. I'll send the presentation to Navi, and she'll make it available in however form. Yeah, for folks that want to connect with me on LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me. And I usually have some useful like job hunt tips and advice and stuff like that, right? So for those that are interested in that side, I can be pretty good on that side. And yeah, I have a podcast. If anybody wants to help me build my Career Buddy app, then I'm more than happy to get some development help as well. But otherwise, I'm more than happy to be of help in any way that I can. So feel free to reach out if I can be useful.
By the way, Luki, we've started an apprenticeship program. So we actually kicked it off in Ontario, and
Okay.
we're hiring apprentices from the community, and we're giving them 12 weeks of training provided by the Mintbean internal team. And so if you're looking for developers for I know that you're building a Career Buddy, we're happy to talk about the apprenticeship program so you can support the community and we can make recommendations. So
For sure, absolutely. So thanks so much. And yeah, hopefully everyone has a great rest of the day and a stressed, controlled day, not necessarily stress-free, right? Stress managed day. So thanks everyone.
take care all.
Thank you, Luki.
Bye.
Thanks.